Hi, and welcome to BioQuest. I'm Letitia, and I will be guiding you through today's de-escalation training. So, our objectives for today are for you to gain a better understanding and knowledge of human behavior responses, to become knowledgeable of interventions that assist with crisis de-escalation, to understand the role of relationships and boundary settings to better assist with crisis de-escalation, and techniques and tips for clinician self-care when dealing with crises often. Let's start off by watching a short video entitled It's Not About the Nail.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's gonna stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever gonna stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing.
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just.
Don't.
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can go on? We can work it out. We can work it out.
Okay, so the video showed the importance of arriving to a conversation with empathy and listening to understand, without the goal of changing the person's mind or even suggesting a solution. As we move throughout our training today, you will learn to allow them to tell you about the nail on their head and empathize with them. The core principles of de-escalation are foundational pieces to effective interventions. First, we want to focus on acute stress, meaning the moments surrounding peak escalation of a person in crisis. Secondly, providers should focus on use of applied empathy. Third, address the behavior and not the individual. And the last principle we want to keep in mind is that escalation typically occurs due to an individual's beliefs about a situation or activating event rather than the event itself. This diagram demonstrates the typical process of the anger arousal cycle. Understanding this process will help us to better understand how to apply effective interventions and de-escalate patients before entering the crisis stage, hopefully. So the trigger phase is when an event causes us to feel threatened at some level and our physiological system prepares to meet that threat. The escalation phase is when our body prepares for a crisis with increased respiration, increased heart rate, and raised blood pressure. Our muscles tense for action, and our voice may become louder or have an altered pitch. And our eyes change shape, our pupils enlarge, and our brows fall. The crisis phase is when our survival instinct steps in, which is the fight or flight response. Our body is then prepared to take action. Unfortunately, during this phase, our quality of judgment is significantly reduced and decisions may be made without the benefit of the best reasoning ability. The recovery phase takes place after some action has resulted during the crisis phase. The body starts to recover from the extreme stress and expenditure of energy. The adrenaline in our blood leaves gradually. Quality of judgment returns as reasoning begins to replace the survival response. The post crisis depression phase is the point when the body enters a short period in which the heart rate slips below normal so the body can regain its balance. Awareness and energy return to allow us to assess what just happened. Another important aspect of understanding how to apply interventions effectively is understanding the basics of behaviors in general. Most practitioners are probably already familiar with this motto, but it is important to refresh our knowledge. We seek to identify the antecedent or the event that occurs prompting a response. Antecedents lead to behaviors based on our belief systems. We are trying to focus on problem behaviors in addition to underlying beliefs that prompted that particular behavioral response. Following each behavior comes some kind of consequence, whether perceived negative or positive, or the event that occurs after the response. Behavior modification comes into play when we implement positive or negative reinforcement stimuli. The most effective combination for stress inoculation includes normalizing the human stress response demonstrated. So you want to validate, validate, validate. Plus, adding a variety of cognitive techniques that we will review today, we will hopefully and typically result in a calm and adaptive behavior response. This slide reviews different considerations when looking at contributing factors to the antecedent portion of problematic behaviors. When assessing or looking to control antecedents, we can focus on environmental triggers, which are the noises, whether something is clean or not, the weather, temperature, personal space, someone's schedule, or even what is happening in the media. Pay attention to your tone of voice, verbal and body language, and how they are impacting your veterans or others in the surrounding environment. Patient-specific antecedents could include family contact, physical health, mental health, and trauma history. Let's look inward and take a look at ourselves. So, what are your triggers? What specific behaviors or specific individuals are triggers for you? How do you respond to others in crisis? What's your tone of voice, your nonverbal responses, and even your emotional responses? And how do you work with those around you? Do you know when to ask one of your coworkers for help? Maybe you guys have a tag team approach. Do you know what your communication style is? Or do you know your strengths within a crisis situation? Are you a great leader, or are you better at taking someone else's leadership and following their direction? Some general physical and verbal recommendations for intervention specialists to be most effective in crisis de escalation situations include: for physical de escalation, you want to allow the person their personal space, remove other patients from the area, make efforts not to be obvious, remove potentially dangerous objects. For verbal de escalation techniques, you want to maintain a calm and quiet voice or tone. Use a minimum amount of words. This is not the time to over explain yourself or talk too much. Give statements of validation, support, and or clear direction. Do not try to reason or immediately resolve issues. This is not the time to problem solve with your individual. Stress response, which is also known as the limbic system, is 0.6 seconds on average. This is our fight or flight response center and often the forgotten freeze state. Our stress response time is based on a variety of variables, including biological and environmental variables. As clinicians, we pick up on cues within our surroundings and take those body language clusters into consideration. So we compartmentalize our body into three different zones. You have your face, you have your upper half, which is anything on your body above the waist, and then the lower half is below your waist. So your hand gesture planes. So hands serve as a punctuation mark for body language. Your hand gestures below the waistline are less trustworthy. And as you can see here in this picture, below the waistline, it establishes dominance or communicates that there are issues. And if you have your hands behind your back, that tells people to stay away and keep at bay and not to draw near. So we want our hands to remain in the middle between your shoulders and your waist. That's considered your safe zone. When we look at the de-escalation cluster, some main points that stand out are easy techniques to use and include. You want to use no weapons hands. Make sure your hands are visible and hold them above your waist. Remember again the safe zone between your shoulders and your waist. Avoid hand evasion and your fist being closed. This indicates that you're ready to fight. We don't want to do that. Avoid using a pointed finger and talking to someone in this manner because this can come across as accusatory. You want to maintain a safe distance. Don't get too close. About 4 to 6 feet is recommended. Do not touch the individual or your veteran. This gives an escalated person permission to defend themselves or become physical in response. Always remember to sidestep if you have someone who is advancing towards you. Literally just take one huge step to the left or one step to the right. You will want to be congruent with paraverbal communication, meaning we want our actions to match what our language is saying. Avoid territorial gestures. Don't get into a power struggle. This will only add fuel to the fire or escalate the current situation. Use encouraging cues. Stay away from the negative or punishment type threats. And stay on the same level as your veteran. If your veteran is sitting, then you should be sitting. If they are standing, then you should stand. You want to try to mirror the eye level as best as you possibly can. Anticipating triggers is going to increase the veteran's understanding of themselves and when they need to apply skills that they have learned. Some cognitive techniques to help you get there include anticipating body sensations of a stress response, including but not limited to them experiencing tunnel vision or experiencing hearing loss. They could experience diminished cognition and working memory, vasoconstriction, which is also known as the shaky feeling that some people experience. And you can also anticipate time distortion. Understand that there is a strong relationship between our beliefs and emotions. People typically have more control over associated beliefs than the emotions that they are experiencing. Our goal here is to get our veterans to be able to tell the difference between responding and reacting. How does validation help us? In order for de escalation to become effective, we first need our veterans to feel heard and cared for. So, in general, and even with our veterans, people need to feel heard or cared for before they can move on from a crisis. Statements of validation and empathy allow a patient to feel heard and understood. You can use statements along the lines of, I understand that you are frustrated with X, Y, and Z, or I see that you are feeling, and then describe what it is that you heard what they said they were feeling. So they may correct you, and if they correct you in this moment, that's okay. Allow them to have that space and opportunity to do so. You can also use the statement of, I'm sorry that that happened to you. Statements of assistance showing care and concern will be along the lines of, how can I help you with this? Or what can we do to make things better? Or even, what would help you to feel more safe? Let's take a look at box breathing and how we can use it effectively. So we're going to watch a short video.
There are times when we all experience feelings of stress or anxiety. In these moments, you can use your breath to help calm those feelings. Box breathing is a simple relaxation technique that can help you reset your breath and return to its normal rhythm. You can do it anywhere, anytime. Box breathing can help reduce stress and improve mood. It can also help with controlling and managing emotions. It's very easy to learn. Imagine breathing around a box. Inhale as you visualize going up one side of the box, gradually filling your lungs with air. When you reach the top, hold your breath for 1 to 5 seconds as you picture going across the top of the box. Exhale gradually as you imagine traveling down the other side of the box. Pause again for 1 to 5 seconds as you go along the bottom of the box. Then repeat. This can be done 7 to 10 times in a row, focusing on the breath. If you can do it sitting down with your feet grounded, that will help too. But really, it can be done anywhere. Box breathing has physiological and psychological benefits. Physiologically, it regulates breath, increases oxygen to the lungs, and can help reduce blood pressure and lower heart rate. Box breathing can help psychologically by providing focus to your breath and removing attention from the things that are causing feelings of stress and anxiety. The repetition of box breathing can also help reduce stress. So, in moments when feelings of stress and anxiety are overwhelming, remember box breathing and the power of your breath as a simple way to relax and breathe a bit easier.
Okay, so that was an example of a deep breathing activity that you can engage in with your veteran. Remember and remind them that it is important to practice the technique before a high stress situation arises. That way, when they are under stress or experiencing anxiety, their body knows what to do. Mhm. In order for someone to stop a certain behavior, they usually need to have an alternative behavior to engage in. Offer distractions or other ways to meet their expressed needs. Teach and reinforce positive and healthy coping skills, such as journaling, listening to music, talking to someone, going for a walk, or even practicing deep breathing. And yes, you can reference the box breathing exercise that we just completed. You can even use that video. So, applied empathy, what is it? Applied empathy is made up of these 4 basic principles or components. Number 1, stay out of the judgment zone. 2, take on the other person's perspective. Take a moment and step into their shoes and attempt to see if you can understand where they are coming from. Third, recognize emotions, helping to clarify any emotions that are being experienced. And lastly, communicate what you notice or recognize back to them. We want to clarify in this moment. They can clarify for us, but this is you stating your understanding of the situation, which can also be referred to as reflective listening. Here are some common empathy blockers. So while these actions or beliefs might have good intentions, they almost always inevitably backfire. So we have one-upping. One-upping sometimes self-disclosing can lead to what is considered one-upping. This is when we are trying to relate to a situation, but you are in turn invalidating that person's feelings in the moment. So you want to stay away from that. Emotional educating. This can come across as patronizing to our veterans. Rescuing. We have to remember that we are not here to fix the situation for them. Storytelling, that goes along with one-upping. Again, refrain. Shutting down emotions. Statements such as, just cheer up, you'll be fine, greatly differs from saying, it's going to be okay. Sympathy, that can be considered as a display of pity. Thinking empathy is agreement. So I can disagree with what choices someone makes while still having empathy for what they are going through. And then lastly, we have the silver lining, at least type statements. So here, these can also be invalidating for our veterans. Here are some miscellaneous tips for staff to be able to best de-escalate situations, because we need to be able to take care of ourselves as well. So self-care. We need to make sure that we are doing what we need to do to stay healthy physically, emotionally, mentally, socially, and spiritually. Self-care is individually based, as it will look different for each of us. Think about, what does self-care look like for you? Know what your triggers are and what behaviors the veterans may exhibit that affect you the most. Know when to pick your battles. So know when to pick your battles with your individuals in your care who do not want to get into a power dynamic struggle. That is not the purpose of our role in their lives. And at times it can be best to concede. Power dynamics will almost always escalate a situation, so lose the ego. Remember, it is not about winning an argument or having the veteran admit if they did something wrong or if they're in the wrong. It is about de-escalating the situation to keep everyone safe. Also factor in the fact that we don't all share the same reality. There's always more than one side to every story. So here's just an exercise, something that you can think about after you have watched our training today. So here's a situation. So you and your family and friends are at a picnic. You all get infected by a virus that will leave you unable to care for yourself for 3 months. Symptoms of the virus include limited mobility, confusion, difficulty communicating, pain, discomfort, and etc. Remember, all of the people in your support circle are infected as well and are suffering from the same symptoms. You need to be isolated from your support system, and you all need the help of hired staff. So here's some questions that you can even take a screenshot, but think of these questions as you move along throughout your day. What type of staff would you like to care for you? What's their demeanor? What's that look like? How would you want them to communicate to you? And how would you want them caring for your other family members? Just think about that, and think about if you currently possess any of the qualities that you would want in the staff that are caring for yourself and for your family. So let's watch a video on calming and de-escalation strategies.
Hi there. This brief video is going to describe simple calming and de-escalation strategies. When people are escalated, it often comes from a sense of threat or fear. Even if the threat is not real at the time, their past experiences with people and the world may have wired their brains to expect harm or danger. When we as humans perceive threat or are otherwise incredibly stressed or angry or scared, we activate our survival brain. This more primitive part of our brain has only one job: to keep us safe. It doesn't care about reason or logic. In fact, the thinking parts of our brain turn off and we act mostly on instincts. These instincts include reading nonverbal cues from our environment. Those nonverbal cues are actually more important than verbal cues or what people say to us. So, when people are escalated, at their core, they want control. We give them control over their own safety and decisions. Do not block people, corner them, or block entrances or possible escape routes. As soon as you do, they want to fight or flee even more. Give 2 arms length distance. Keep our body posture open so it does not appear that you are hiding anything. Keep your body posture as relaxed as you can, even if it's hard. A looming, towering figure only sends the message that you want to dominate. So if it feels okay to do so, ask them what would make them feel safe or feel better. Put the control back on their turf. Ask what would help. Ask what could happen next. One of the most famous practices and sayings for de-escalation is low and slow, from Teresa Bolick. Low and slow refers to both your body movements and your voice or speech. Just like it sounds, we want to keep the tone of our voice low and the speed of our voice slow. When you lower your tone and speed, it makes it more possible for the other person to process what you are saying and not feel threatened, as opposed to a higher pitched tone and quick speech, which frankly increases stress. Then we also try to lower and slow down our body movements and posture. So try to sit in a chair or on the floor, especially if you're with children, and especially if the person who is escalated is lower down than you. Maybe they're on the floor or in a chair. If you get on an even playing field, this gives the nonverbal cue that you mean no threat. And try to slow down your body movements so as to not further alarm their cues for danger. Move slowly, walk slowly, keep your hands out and open where they can see them. Next, use the tip, name it to tame it, made popular by Dan Siegel. By naming emotions, we gain control over them. Therapists have known this forever. Acknowledge that they may be feeling anxious, angry, especially if it's a child. Stay with that feeling, validate it. Let them know the feeling is okay as long as they stay safe. We also like to say, regulate over educate. When people are in distress, it's not the time to teach or educate or think back about what they could have done differently. The only goal is to regulate their emotions. Usually this is done by giving space and time, staying calm, and helping provide a calming atmosphere. It takes the body 20 to 30 minutes to come back down to baseline after a perceived or an actual threat. Just think of your own situations when something really scared you or startled you. Even if you look like you're getting back to normal, your body is still pumping all those stress hormones for a while. So wait it out. Just help people regulate. If the person was aggressive or destructive, especially if it's a child, there does, of course, need to be a consequence. But wait on talking about the consequence. Finally, two of the most important things you can do all along the way, and that's before people get too distressed, or even while they're distressed, is to validate their feelings and be empathic. I see you are struggling. I see this is hard. If it's okay, I'll stay here with you until you feel better.
Okay, so that video reinforced some of the topics that we have already discussed in today's training. So some general recommendations. In addition to ensuring the scene is relatively safe for you to approach, the team should consider the following safety precautions. You'll want to provide extra space when approaching and don't get too close. You want to have multiple exits and try not to sit with your back towards an exit. Don't let the person get between you and the exit. You want to make sure that you have a clear path. Keep equipment and personnel clear in case a hasty exit becomes necessary. and do not swarm the patient or the veteran with multiple team members. Select one individual to engage while the others hang back a few feet. So some strategies when working with trained forces individuals. So when veterans experiencing PTSD symptoms are agitated and or in crisis situations, they are experiencing heightened activation of their natural fight or flight responses. Primary concern at that point is for personal safety. Because it helps their fight or flight response, veterans in crisis situations are particularly attuned to things going on in their immediate environment. If anything happens that is ambiguous, a veteran in crisis may default to a negative interpretation. For example, if another staff member arrives for support, a veteran in crisis may think they're here to gang up on me, even if the new staff that just arrived is actually present to help ensure safety. Military training focuses on use of physical aggression as a tool in dangerous situations. However, because of this training and experience, veterans may also be in better control of their own use of aggression. This gives intervention specialists an opportunity to team up with the veteran to reduce the need for physical tactics. Veterans with tactical military training are aware of most, if not all, the tactics and techniques employed in a crisis situation. So, threat assessment. We cannot accurately predict violent acts as this remains virtually impossible. Predictions that a patient will not be violent in a specific situation and time is most likely to be correct. Incidents of violence are rare compared to the number of patients being treated. Efforts to make such predictions are typically based upon static characteristics of a possibly disruptive individual, such as gender, age, and a history of violence. Behavioral threat assessment is a proactive preventative approach aimed at identifying observable behaviors which indicate an individual's progress on the pathway to violence, and we want to intervene at the lower risk level. Dynamic factors associated with the disruptive individual, the potential victim or victims, and the context and situation are important in determining whether there is currently a low, medium, or high level of threat. These dynamic factors include the subject's current mental state and health, any grievances they may have, recent losses, and other personal stress, recent acquisitions of weapons, and other similar factors. Estimating the level of threat is not the same as making a prediction. As providers or staff that are relied on during crisis intervention, we need to first look at the lens we are using to look at potential escalation and shift from a violence prediction model approach to a risk assessment model approach. Violence prediction assumes that dangerousness resides within the individual already, and that dangerousness is viewed as static or constant. Furthermore, the violence prediction approach assumes that the risk of violence is dichotomous, meaning either or type thinking. And this risk is either present or not present versus understanding that it is ever changing and dependent on a variety of other factors. When we shift into the threat assessment model, our understanding of dangerousness depends on many interacting variables involving the subject, target, and setting. Additionally, dangerousness or the risk of violence is viewed as dynamic and ever changing or shifting, meaning the risk of violence ranges along a continuum from low to high. Think of a sliding scale or any spectrum disorder update like autism or schizophrenia. Pathways to effective and predatory violence. So, this important concept addresses the interaction of the subject's grievances and motivations, the speed of movement up the path, target characteristics, and presence of other risk factors. Understanding the pathway provides opportunities for the threat manager to interrupt or reverse the trajectory towards a violent act. Although there is a similar pathway for effective violence, it is usually shorter. It will lack research, planning, and preparation, and it will move quickly from grievance to ideation to breach and then to attack. That will be the first demonstrative module that you see here on the left-hand side. This would be seen as more of a reaction. The pure predatory and effective pathways form the endpoints of a continuum of violence, and there may be elements of planning and preparation found in what was largely an affective outburst. So some general reminders. It is best practice and patient-centered to gather information from the disruptive veteran directly and or their family with consent when possible. Be open-minded and use non-judgmental language. Identify static risk factors. That would be their gender, age, criminal record, things that change slowly over time. Then you'll want to identify the dynamic risk factors. That would be your mood stability, substance use, financial situation, family support, things that may change with intervention or may change on their own. Leveraging existing care relationships is often an effective way to de-escalate. Behavioral threat assessment is a problem-solving process. Let's get into nonverbal versus verbal communication. So you'll want to recognize emotion. Recognizing emotion, this is nonverbal acuity, and it is the third step in the applied empathy model. We want to pay attention to things such as body language, facial expressions, paraverbal communication, touch, gestures, interpersonal spacing or proxemics, and the focus of attention. Paraverbal acuity. Congruency equals the effective communication in crisis, which equals de-escalation, which is our goal. We want to make sure that we are paying attention to our tone, our cadence, and our volume. Some effective verbal interventions include utilizing rapport and applied empathy. Avoid the writing reflex. We are not here to solve their problems for them or to give them the answers. We are here to build capacity and encourage effective use of skills. Timing is everything. If we are unable to de-escalate before someone reaches a certain point on their emotional thermometer, it is likely that they will further dysregulate. De-escalation utilizes already established rapport, not manipulation. Use support staff that are effective when working with the veteran. Try to avoid bribing, not try to avoid bribing, avoid bribing. This rapport is achieved through using applied empathy over time. Positive responses. So we are looking for positive responses from our individuals served, and that includes, but is not limited to, naming the emotion. Again, validation is key. Set limits or expectations, letting them know that if they cross a certain physical boundary, what the consequences may be based upon your company's policy. Encourage a self-soothing skill, such as box breathing, and demonstrate how to use that skill effectively. You can ask them to join in and practice with you, or you can even provide them with the YouTube link to a video to facilitate the skill use and guidance on their own. If you're able to remove excess stimulation, for example, if there are other people present or constant interruptions coming in and out, by all means, please remove that excess stimulation. If you and the patient or the veteran are able to safely move to a different environment, by all means, again, please do so. Avoid telling them what to do and rather do what you want them to do. That's called mirroring. We want to encourage them to follow your lead. You can even turn this into a game if it lightens the mood. Self disclosure can be helpful at times, but this requires being skillful to not divulge too much information that it can be weaponized or used against you later on. Be willing to negotiate or compromise in order to get to a partial agreement. Our goal is to ensure the veteran's safety, not to win. Verbal communication. So you want to make efforts to describe and explain your actions of what you're doing in that moment so that your patient feels as if they are in on it with you and you guys aren't working against each other. This will convey respect. We want to convey respect towards our veterans so that they will in turn mirror this and convey respect for and towards us. Ask and give information in a calming manner and give directions that will distract and refocus their behavior. The goal here is to get them away from their current triggers that are causing dysregulation in their emotional state. The approach we want to focus on is to ask for and ensure we are using the person's name whenever possible. When using a personalized intervention, the patient will in turn feel as though you are there for them. You will want to refrain from using such terms as sweetie or honey. Expect and, when possible, accommodate rather than react to strong emotional responses. When we are giving and requesting information, we first and foremost want to ask about the veteran's immediate concerns. Then we'll shift into collecting information in a way that is calming. Encourage your veteran to answer a series of simple and direct questions to help focus attention. Ask questions about the order of what happened in a structured way to help organize the veteran's thinking. If talking about the situation increases the stress in the veteran, ask unrelated questions to distract them from his or her reactions. Use reflective, clarifying, or summarizing statements to communicate that you understood what the person was saying correctly. Convey that you are there to help the situation and to keep the veteran safe. Let the veteran know that in these circumstances, stress reactions, while they may be alarming, are understandable and human, and that they are not alone. When we are giving direction, we want to ensure that the veteran is moved to a safe location if warranted. Whenever possible, protect the veteran from unnecessary exposure to additional circumstances that could cause additional distress and could allude to more dysregulated emotions. Provide direction that is clear and positive. Direction should be oriented toward directing the veteran in what to do rather than what not to do. For example, instead of yelling, "Get out of the way," try stating in a calm voice, "I need you to move over here so you don't get hurt." Give the person something to do that will provide a distraction for them. If you have to act firmly or abruptly, moderate the impact at your first opportunity by returning to a calm tone, explaining the importance of compliance with your instructions, and emphasizing that the veteran's safety and protection are your foremost concern. Lastly, reinforce compliance by promptly and positively acknowledging actions that follow your instructions. In other words, it is okay to give verbal praise when they have followed your directions. Boundaries. Setting and adhering to boundaries is a significant part of your role as the provider. So, why do we need to set boundaries? So, the reasons for having policies regarding professionalism and personal boundaries are many. So, first, we want to protect our veteran. We want to protect the staff, and we also want to protect the company image. Many veterans are easy to take advantage of. It is our responsibility to make sure that that doesn't happen, especially since they are in our care. Staff who get too close physically and touch those who don't want to be touched are at increased risk for assault as people jump to defending themselves. Staff that get too close physically or share too much personal information with pathological veterans risk the veteran using that information to get to them or their loved ones. This can be verbal attacks or actual physical danger. Socially, we have expectations of how professionals act that differ from how people are allowed to act outside of the workplace. The impression of staff becomes the impression of the company as a whole. So, some more tips for personal boundaries. So, employees are not to provide services for any client at the employee's residence unless it is stipulated in the client or veteran's ISP or without prior consent of the company director or designee. Personal and professional lives should remain separate. Be mindful when disclosing personal information while in a professional setting. So, while at work, during scheduled time, employees are expected to devote all efforts to performing their job duties and responsibilities. Employees are not to conduct personal business and or social activities while providing direct services and support to an individual. This includes, but is not limited to, the personal use of cell phones, including texting or even using the individual's phone, use of personal laptop, choosing activities the employee wishes to attend rather than the veteran served, or even running personal errands. Employees are not to have family members, friends, or other visitors at the work site unless approved by a supervisor. All visitors are to sign in at the front desk prior to entering the building. Be mindful of those receiving your services and seeing visitors and potentially asking questions or wanting to speak to unknown guests. Remember, your veterans can become confused about these boundaries at times. And if you consider the non consequential role that you play in their life, this makes sense. Simply remind your veterans who get those boundaries confused with a gentle tone and reiterate that we are there for support, not as friends or family. So be aware of your surroundings. Employees are not to complain about their job duties or responsibilities or the company in front of veterans, families and guardians, or any other outside entities. Employees are not to discuss issues they may be having with their supervisors, co-workers, or other individuals served in front of any individuals within our care, their families or guardians, or again, other outside entities. All issues and concerns should be brought to the attention of the appropriate management personnel or human resources. If discussing personal matters at work with a coworker, be mindful to do so in break rooms behind closed doors or anywhere clients are not able to hear the conversations. Remember, negativity spreads, and complaining about peers or supervisors leads them to get involved in arguments or pick up on attitudes towards other staff that they would not have initially had. Think about overall work morale and how you would want staff to behave if it were your family member that was being served. Relationships. Employees should not share personal contact information with their individual served or your veterans, such as personal cell phone numbers, personal email addresses, or your social networking sites. Employees are not to discuss personal problems or share details of their personal life with your veterans. Employees should form mentoring re- Instead, employees should form relationships, with the veteran served rather than acting as their friend. This implies an equal relationship. We share details about our background and current social activities with our close friends and family. So if we share this information with the veterans, they then assume that we have a special relationship with them. Be mindful of how you talk. Avoid calling your veterans baby, my love, sweetie, cutie pie, any of those names. Outside of work, employers are not to have contact with the veterans outside of their scheduled work hours unless approved by a supervisor. Employees are prohibited from lending or borrowing any money or personal property to or from the individual served. Further, employees are prohibited from hiring an individual served for personal gain. If you see a veteran that we serve out at the store or anywhere outside, do not engage in conversation. Let it be their choice if they want to engage in a conversation with you. Borrowing, giving money, or having the veterans work for you ultimately opens up their vulnerability. Buying items from them can lead to suspicion that you possibly took advantage of them on the price. Make sure you avoid any and all of these practices. Pictures in social media. So, except as specifically authorized by your supervisor for purposes of approved pictures, maybe for newsletters, employees are not permitted to photograph, videotape, or record any meeting or individual served, or make a copy of any document related to your individual served. Employees are not to have any social media. That could be Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, the tick of the talk, any of those social media platforms. No involvement with your client on those platforms whatsoever with your veterans. Social media is about your personal life, and the veteran should not have full access to your life. Remember, no gift giving or receiving. No employee should ever ask a veteran served for gas money to take them on outings or refuse to take a veteran on an outing because they do not have gas money. Although gift giving is a traditional way to show goodwill and celebrate special occasions, it can create future problems. Employees are not to accept or give gifts to the veteran served or their family members without approval from the business area executive. Physical contact. So, physical contact is a regular part of your job. It is always a good idea to define what constitutes appropriate touching. What constitutes an appropriate physical boundary depends, in part, upon an individual's life experience and cultural background. It also constitutes an appropriate physical contact if it should continually be evaluated to ensure that it is suitable to each individual served. This will be team directed and guardian approved. Best practice is to keep physical boundaries at a distance and remain professional. Remember, you can do handshakes, fist bumps, or even elbow bumps. All employees should model and maintain appropriate physical behavior with the individual served or veterans. Become familiar with your company's policy on physical contact with your veterans, usually only in response to imminent threats. Some examples of inappropriate physical contact include full body hugs, kissing, touching, touching the genital or chest areas, tickling, piggyback rides, wrestling, isolating individuals in closets, hallways, sleeping areas, or bathrooms, touching the underwear of your residents, unless you're doing so for the purpose of maybe assisting with laundry or putting their clothes away. Any type of massage would be inappropriate, and any physical contact that makes your veteran uncomfortable would be an example of inappropriate physical contact. So, appropriate physical touch. Physical touching that may result as a product of assisting with personal care or hygiene, medication administration, behavior support, or any other identified needs should be addressed in your individual's plan. For licensed staff, if an employee is professionally licensed or certified, they are expected to also follow the code of ethics of their particular discipline. Become familiar with your agency's policy on reporting guidelines and the state mandated reporting expectations. This is all for today on our de-escalation training. Thank you and have a great day.